Hello, and welcome to the final week, week 8 of the Mission Ready Performance Challenge. This final week, we are talking about how to build a well-rounded fitness routine. So, what are we going to be able to do after this presentation? First up, you're going to be able to know and understand what a balanced resistance training program looks like. We're going to dive in deep with resistance training. We're also going to walk through how to create a cardio program that targets your goals. So after we dive into those, you should be able to write an entry-level workout for yourself or for others. If you're a PTL, this will be similar to some of the training you'll receive for that. And then you'll be able to understand how to target different training goals through your training. Because if you're training for a 5K versus a marathon, those should look different. All right, so how much should I be working out? I get this question a lot of like, how much is ideal? Well, the answer is that it depends. It depends on what your goals are. Are you training for something specific, or are you training just to be healthy? Um, how much time do you have to give towards training is going to make a difference too. What other demands do you have on your time? If you have a family, your training plan may look different than Joe Schmo who's single and has all the time in the world to spend in the gym, right? Um, do you enjoy training? Or is it a means to do something else that you enjoy? If you don't enjoy training, we probably don't want to create a workout plan where you're having to be in the gym for hours throughout the week. We want to do something where you can get in, get out, that type of thing. But if it enables you to do something that you enjoy, then that's something that we might need to prioritize. Uh, in general, for most individuals, 2 or more days of strength training and 2 or more days of cardio is going to be a good kind of baseline. And then daily activity is going to be a good must for all of us. Even if you aren't doing a structured workout, getting up and going for a walk or getting out and doing one of the things I like to do that I don't get to do very much right now is rock climbing. And so something like that where I'm going to get out, I'm going to do something with my body each day. I think it's important to recognize that microdosing workouts or doing like small workouts can be just as effective as doing a longer workout routine, as long as your total weekly volume and intensity is equal or close to equal to a longer workout plan or like a normal workout plan. Um, and high enough to promote adaptation. So as long as we're working hard enough and getting in enough volume, it doesn't matter how you break up those workouts. It doesn't matter if I'm doing 2 to 3 workouts that are an hour long, or if I'm doing 4 or 5, 6 workouts that are closer to 30 minutes. As long as my total volume is enough and I'm working hard in each of those sessions, you're going to be able to see adaptation. And a lot of times we actually see equal or better adaptation because a lot of times it results in greater consistency if you're able to do smaller workouts. So why should I resistance train? A lot of people don't strength train at all, but it's important to recognize that resistance training can be really important. A strong body is a resilient body. Um, when we do chronic or long-term resistance training, it actually helps support our immune system, especially that like first line of defense part of our immune system. Uh, when we strength train well, it reduces the risk of acute, so like in the moment, and chronic long-term injury. It supports our metabolic health, so it actually improves the pathways that surround insulin, even for those who have type 1 diabetes. So it actually helps our body use fuel better. And I think something that a lot of people find once they really get into it, maybe not initially, but as you can do it more consistently, strength training can really help boost your confidence and be a positive outlet for negative emotions. Um, it can be really good to, if you've had a stressful day, it feels so good to go in and just move around some weight. I like doing power stuff, and so I'll get in there and I'll throw some med balls or some sandbags. It really just kind of helps get out some of that frustration in a really positive way. And then it feels really good. Like if you can lift some heavy shit, then like it just feels really good. You feel good about yourself, right? And then it helps our body as we age. As we age, our power and our strength are very quick to go. As we get older, we lose some of that muscle mass if we aren't using it. And so, creating a long term habit of strength training really helps us as we get older. We're going to be much more resilient to falls. We're going to be much more resilient just to be able to do daily tasks. Think about carrying in your groceries or carrying like a heavy load of laundry through your house. If it's inconvenient now to do some of those things, it'll be very frustrating when you're, 60, 70, 80 years old. So it's important to recognize that there's a difference between just working out and doing training. So working out, a lot of times we're doing an exercise because it feels hard or it leaves you feeling gas versus training. We're taking training variables like our exercise selection, how hard are we working, what type of volume are we doing, and we're going to put that into a structured and progressive plan that points us towards our goals. Working out a lot of times has no focus plan, structure, or purpose. It just feels hard. Training, however, is going to include activities and exercises that are very purposeful towards our desired outcome. Working out a lot of times includes things just because they're cool or popular. It's the Instagram and the TikTok feed, right? That feed like, oh, well, that looks cool, or oh man, like this influencer does that, and I really like their stuff. I like how they look, so it must be good for me too. But that's not always the case. When we are training, we are planning variation in our workout. So we're planning changes in our workout intensity. So how hard are we working? We're not just doing something that feels hard. And so when it really comes down to it, like it's not wrong to do just a workout because something feels hard here and there. But if that's all we're doing, we can't really expect to meet our goals. If we're not shaping our training specifically to meet what we want to do, it's not going to get us there. That's like like working out if you went on a drive and you had someone in the passenger seat flipping a coin every time you needed to take a turn, and if it's heads, you go right, tails, you go left. That's what working out is going to be. Like, if you have a destination in mind, do you think how likely is it that you're going to get there? Not in a very timely manner, at least. Versus with training, it's like taking the most efficient route, right? Sometimes we maybe go do the scenic route because we want to add some like glam muscles along the way, or sometimes we have to take a detour because life happens, right? But training is going to help get us there much more efficiently than just doing random workouts that feel hard. A note on technique and intent. It's a well-written workout plan done with really poor technique is likely ineffective at best and harmful at worst. So if I go into my workout plan, even if it's like the best workout plan in the world, which doesn't exist, then if I'm doing it incorrectly, then I'm more likely to hurt myself. If I'm using poor exercise technique, that's going to lead to injury either in the moment or long term if I'm repeatedly doing a pattern that's putting stress in the wrong places on my body. Um, and on the other side, if I'm using excellent lifting technique, it's going to help support injury resilience and decrease pain. Properly performed strength training is actually one of the best ways to increase your mobility. Um, if I'm lifting through a full range of motion and I'm doing it with really good technique and muscle tone, and creating tension in the correct places and allowing my body to move in the places it needs and wants to move, I'm actually going to be able to increase my mobility, which is going to help decrease my risk for injury. And it's also important to recognize that we can do an exercise technically correct. It may look correct, but if I'm doing that without purposeful intent, it is going to be less effective. I'm going to get out of an exercise what I put into it. If I go through it with kind of like half-assing it, I'm not going to get the benefit out of it that I could get out of it, right? Your mind has powerful influence over your body. If I go through a squat and I pretend like I'm lifting 0 pounds, then I'm not going to get a ton of muscle activation out of it. Versus if I do a squat and I act like I'm lifting 1,000 pounds and I'm creating tension, I'm bearing down, I'm going to squeeze really hard, I'm going to get much more benefit out of that. Obviously, not as much benefit as if I were really lifting 1,000 pounds, but if you're able to change the tension and the tone and the purpose in your body, you're going to get a lot more benefit out of that exercise. And I think it's important to recognize that if you have a lack of intention, a lot of times that's going to lead to that poor technique. Maybe on the first couple you do okay, but if you're not being purposeful in how you do your exercise, that's going to lead to poor execution. And then again, kind of up to that first set of bullet points where you're at a higher risk for chronic injury or pain. So I think it can be helpful to kind of see what this looks like. So hopefully you guys are able to see this a little bit. So if I'm doing a single leg RDL, I can come through, I can do it technically proficient where I go into my thing. I've just got an 8 pound. I'm really just kind of going through the motions. Maybe I'm looking around, so I'm going to be a little more unstable, right? Versus I can go through, I can pretend that this dumbbell weighs 80 pounds. I'm going to have to brace. I'm going to have to set my shoulders. I'm squeezing my core. I'm making a six pack, right? As much as I can. I'm going to be really active with my foot in the floor. I'm actively pushing my foot in the ground. I've got my other hand in a fist. I'm creating lots of tension. I'm going to go back. I'm very purposeful in where I'm putting the weight. And then I'm going to come up with a lot of purpose and intention, right? Those two movements look different just because of the intention and the way that I'm going to approach that movement. So let's get into what it looks like to actually create that fitness plan. So overall, when we think about good training is going to be consistent. You're going to hear me harp on this a lot today. There are many plans that can and will work, and that will work really well, but the main ingredient has to be consistency. If you're not getting in and doing the work, if it's a 3 days per week plan, like you better be in there 3 days per week. That's not to say that missing one here and there is gonna like completely ruin your plan. It's not. I'm not here for that, right? But if you are missing, if your required plan for your goal needs to be 3 days per week, and out of 8 weeks, 6 of them you only get in 1 or 2 workouts, you can't expect that that plan is going to do what that plan has the capacity to do for you. So you have to get in and you have to do it with purpose and intention. Good training is intentional. It doesn't mean that we can't zone out sometimes, especially like if you're doing a long, slow cardio bout, but it does mean that you need to know the goal for a workout. So if I head into a workout and my goal is to get as much capacity, like as much work done in a short amount of time, but I come in with the mentality of like a long, slow run, I'm not going to get the needed intensity that I need for that day. If I'm working on power and I come in and I approach it like I'm doing lots of reps, that's not going to serve me well for power. I'm not going to be putting in the pop that I need into every rep if I have a 20 rep mentality, right? Um, this is a really great place. Workouts become a really great place when we're thinking about this to practice mindfulness. Um, Being present with what is going on in your body and being mindful of where you are and what your purpose is in that moment, and just really practicing like what are the thoughts I have around this exercise and around my approach. What are the things that I'm feeling, and how can I change that tension in my body and change the attitude that I have maybe about that workout. A good training is going to be varied with a plan. So, intentional variation in your workouts is going to be crucial. If we do the same thing all the time, like we're never going to adapt to the stimulus that we need, right? We need to have some planned variation. Not every workout should look the same. I think a lot of times, especially with strength training, people are like, oh, well, if it's good enough for one day, then it's good enough for four. And that's not necessarily true. We want to make sure that we are planning some planned variation throughout the week. But it also doesn't mean that we want our workouts to be random. We want to use different types of workouts strategically for different purposes. So whether that's through exercise selection or varying our intensity, that type of thing, we want to have that planned variation. And then good training is progressive. If we do the same thing that we've done all the time, you're only going to get the results that you've got before, right? If I only put in 50% effort and that's all I'm ever willing to do, I'm never going to exceed that. Um, if we want to improve, we have to challenge our bodies and our minds with a more difficult task in a smart, strategic, and stepwise way. Training should feel hard. There should also be some planned easy days, but like in general, like training should feel challenging to your body and or to your mind. Um, if I'm going on a run and my goal is to improve my pace, like that run is gonna maybe not feel comfortable, and that's okay. I need to be able to progress past what I'm comfortable with doing so that I can make progress going forward. So the process for creating an overview of our workout is we need to define your goal and your why. We're going to create a Fit VP overview. So Fit VP is frequency, intensity, time, type. A lot of times you'll see it in there. I've added in volume and progression. You'll see that in some other textbooks and stuff too. We may need to adjust our short-term goal if we need to. Depending on as we walk through our overview, if it's not realistic with our current situation, we may need to adjust for a shorter term goal in the meantime. And then we get to work out all the X's and O's, all the details. So, defining your goal and your why, we're just going to touch on this super quickly because we went over this all in week one. So, the type of goal that you have is going to determine many of the X's and O's of your training. So, if my goal is to run a marathon, my training is going to look different than if my goal is to break 1,000 pounds combined powerlifting, right? On squat, deadlift, and bench. So, if I'm, training for a strength goal, you bet I'm going to have a lot more strength training in my workout plan. If my goal is to do marathon training, then you bet I'm going to have a whole lot more running in my program. Um, Even if your goal is just to be healthy or to be in shape, we really need to identify what that means for you. What does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be in shape? What does that look like in your day to day? And that's going to help us shape what your training actually looks like, right? If, I recognize that when I go for a walk, I'm out of breath, like maybe I'm going to be focusing more on like a blend of cardio and strength. Um, if I recognize that, man, like when I go to pick up my kiddo, like I just feel really weak. I feel like I'm hunching over all the time, right? Maybe strength training is going to take a bigger priority for that. And again, consistency is going to be king. I have to be consistent with what my plan is and what I need to do for my goal. Otherwise, we're not going to reach it. And then I need to identify why is this important to me? Rooting yourself in that why is going to help encourage commitment to your goal. It's going to guide well-informed adjustments for unforeseen circumstances. So if something comes up, um, if you're rooted in that why, you're going to be able to make the decision that moves you closer, even if we have to take a detour. It's going to help you stay on track towards the end goal, right? We're not going to veer off and fall off. We're going to be able to kind of adjust and come out maybe a little bit slower than we'd like, but we're still going to get to that same destination. And it's really important that we get to the root. Why is this goal important to me? Why is it important that I, feel healthier, that I'm able to pick up my kiddos? And then why is that important to me? And why is that thing important to me until you get to the very bottom to something that's really important to you? I think a good example of this that I've had in my family recently is my mother-in-law just had a shoulder surgery, and one of her main priorities for getting back some strength and being a little bit more fit is so that she can play with her grandkids. We've got a whole slew of grandkids on my husband's side of the family, and so she wants to be able to get up off and to get up and down off the floor and play with them. She wants to be able to pick them up and hold them, right? She wants to be able to go do fun activities with them. And exercise is not her thing. But you know what? She's crushing PT. She did her first one and she made a lot of ground there. She's been a lot more active than I think my husband has even seen her in a lot of her life. And a lot of that is because she's identified what's important to her. And so that allows her to overcome the resistance that she has to exercise, and to really focus on being able to get back to what matters for her. So once you've identified that goal and identified what's important to you, then that's when we get to break down, what does this look like from a logistics standpoint. So we're going to walk through Fit VP. So the F is frequency of training. And so that's going to be, how many times per week do we need to train to reach your goal? And we're going to walk through some of these details. So if you don't know right away, that's okay. Have a pen and paper ready, so that we can go through that, as you go. So we're going to talk about, how many days per week is ideal for different goals. And then the other thing that we have to consider is what time do you have available in a typical week? Where can you plug in workouts? How much time do you have? The intensity of training. What level of intensity does your goal require? If, I want to do something that involves sprinting, that requires very high intensity, very high effort bouts, within my training, versus if I'm training for something that's more lower intensity geared, something that is a long duration workout like a marathon or a half. That training is going to maybe take a long time, but I'm not having to put in as much effort into that bout. It's hard in a different way. It's a different type of intensity. But when we're thinking about like percent of max speed, um, those things look very different. Same thing with strength training. If my goal is to be just super freaking strong, right? Then I better be lifting heavy each time. If my goal is to, as one of my grad school professors would say, look good naked, then that's going to look a little different. My reps are going to be a little bit slower. They're going to still be moderately heavy, but I'm going to be doing a lot more reps than if my goal is just to be really strong. The third variable is going to be time, and we can think about this in a few different ways. So, what is the time required for your activity? Like, what does your goal require from a time standpoint? If your goal is to run a marathon, you need to be able to plan hours to go run, right? Versus a 5K, you can train in 30 minutes or less, for a lot of your runs. You might have a few that are more than 30, but for the most part, you can train in pretty time efficient ways throughout the week. What is the time required to reach your goal date? Do you have a goal time frame? Like, are you looking to lose, 20 pounds by your sister's wedding? Or do you have kind of some flexibility with that time? Is it reasonable and sustainable to train for in that time frame? If I need to lose 20 pounds for a wedding, but that wedding is in a month, that might be pushing it. No, not might be, it will be pushing it. We need to do some research and find out if that's reasonable. And then what time do you have available? Do you have small blocks of time available, large blocks of time? Does your goal fit with the time you have available right now? Can we modify some of your training to fit it in to what you have? Or do we need to modify for a shorter term goal for this season? And then what type of exercise, which we're going to dive into a ton today. What skills and attributes are required for you to meet your goal? Do you need to be strong? Do you need to be endurant through a long period of time? Do you need to have lots of pop behind your activity and be in power? Do you just want to look good? What does that mean? Um, and then we need to also consider, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What do you gravitate towards? A lot of times we need to do the things that we don't do already. And so sometimes we're filling those gaps. Other times we need to play on the strengths that we already have. The V is volume of work. So this is how much are we doing? We need to consider, what is the minimal effective dose? What is the minimum amount that we can do to get the outcome that we're looking for? And for some of us, we may be able to push farther towards the maximum of dose that we can do, especially if you enjoy exercise, or we are wanting to create some resiliency. We may need to push those boundaries a little bit, but we need to know at least at a minimum what's effective, and then kind of play between that minimum dose and the max point before the point of injury, or burnout, right? And kind of play in that gap. And then we need to consider, where are we at right now? If I'm running 10 miles a week, then, and my goal is to run a half marathon, I'm going to need to be able to run more than 10 miles a week, right? I'm going to have to push into more mileage. I'm going to need more mileage than that to reach my goal. And then the P is progression, which we'll talk about for each strength training and cardio training. But we can think about progression in a few different ways. We can progress the skill itself. We can make something a more challenging skill. We can do it with more intensity. So, like within strength training, that's typically going to be the amount of resistance that you're pushing, but it can also be like speed of how quickly you're doing the movement, that type of thing. We're going to progress volume, and that's all going to be dependent on what the goal is, as well as how much you're doing. But really, what progression boils down to is, what do you need to continue driving to adapt for your goal? Where are we short of your goal, and how do we manipulate our training to progress towards that so that you're able to meet that? So to kind of dive into some of the details based on training frequency, based on goals, I put some common ones here. It's obviously not all inclusive, but hopefully you can kind of fill in some of the gaps based on what's here. But when we're thinking about that frequency, we need to be thinking about, how many times per week does my goal require me to train? So open up your calendar, open up your schedule, and take a look at the chart. Find which goal relates to you uh, most closely, and kind of take a look at, when can you plug in those training sessions. I've tried to include some time estimates. I know they aren't perfect, but um, recognize that the duration of each can vary based on your goal, your availability to train. We can break some of these up into micro sessions, that type of thing. Um, and your fitness background is going to play into this too, right? But if we're thinking about something like weight loss, in general, I need to be doing at least 2 cardio days per week. I need to be doing 2 strength days per week. Those two are going to kind of help balance together. And then I might even consider adding in some power for my um, power. Really helps to build up muscle mass, and some of that, like when you look at sprinters, they're very powerful athletes, right? They look jacked for a reason. It's because of the amount of, it's not just strength training that they're doing, it's the amount of power and pop intensity that they're putting behind that, and you get some of that from power work. Um, Vice versa, if I'm working for muscle gain, then cardio, I still am gonna probably do at least 2 cardio sessions per week, but those cardio sessions might look a little different. But then I'm really gonna be using a ton of strength training. I need to be strength training at least 4 days a week if my goal is truly to add on some muscle. And nutrition's obviously gonna play into that too. And then even some power, like I said, the sprinters, they look jacked for a reason, and that's the intensity that they're putting in there. Um, all of these sessions don't have to be separate, right? I can train power and strength in the same day. I can train strength and cardio in the same day. There's some overlap there. They don't all have to be separate. We don't need to be training, 8 days or 8 training sessions in a week. You can get a lot done within 3, but stacking them. So we can be smart about that, but use the table, pause the video for as long as you need to kind of start mapping some of that out. So then we're going to fill our week. So I've included an example for someone who maybe wants to be able to run a 5K in under 30 minutes. So they've got a time goal, but it's not something that's crazy. And maybe we've got a specific race date in mind, and then maybe they have a secondary goal of just like, man, I notice when I rock climb, I just don't feel strong. When I hike, I feel kind of shaky. And I'd really like to feel just a little bit more solid when I'm doing those activities, right? So when we fill out their weekly calendar, maybe we put in a couple of run days. So I've got a run on their Monday and their Tuesday, their Wednesday. They might do some low intensity cardio or an activity that they enjoy. So maybe that's a day that they're going to go for a hike or something. Or it could also be a rest day, depending on what that week looks like. If it's a super stressful week, there's no harm, no foul in taking that as a rest day, right? We're going to take another rest day on the weekend. And then their Tuesday, Thursdays are going to be those strength training days. And we're going to pair that with some low intensity cardio. So we're going to sneak in some micro doses of the low intensity cardio. That way we're able to do the higher intensity stuff on the other 2 days, the Monday and the Friday. And then on the weekend, we're going to prioritize doing an activity, something that's physically active with our family or that you enjoy. So maybe that's going to the climbing gym, taking a hike. Maybe it's doing a bike ride with the family. Um, maybe you go play putt-putt or you go to the park and play and you're chasing your kiddos, right? Something like that. So whatever that looks like for you, that's kind of how I'm thinking about plugging that in. So I know that if we're training for that 5K, I need at least 2, probably 3 days of cardio. So we've got our 2 runs and then some additional low intensity cardio. And then I need at least 2 days of strength. You could also plug in a third either on the weekend, or you could stack your some of your running and strength work together. I would do them either as completely separate days, or depending on what the run is, will depend on if it goes first or second. If it's something really high intensity, I might do it first. If it's something that's lower intensity, and I just kind of need to tick the box on it, I might do it second. And then the other thing that we're going to plan into is, what are we going to do every day to help maintain those movement breaks, to do to keep that step count high. So we might shoot for at least 7,000 steps a day. We might have some days that are a little under, some that are over, but we want to be shooting for around that 7,000 steps a day. And then each day, especially when this person's at work, maybe the goal is to take at least one, if not two, 5 to 10 minute walk breaks, or like a movement break where we go through some mobility if our hips are feeling tight, something like that throughout the day, just to kind of keep things moving, keep things feeling good. So when you look at your overview of your week and kind of that broad, I know we haven't dialed into the X's and O's yet, but when you're looking at just the overview of like, how does this look in my week? Like, do I need to go to the gym here? Do I need to be able to plan to run here? That type of thing. Um, Ask yourself, are you ready, willing, and able to do the variables required to meet your goal? If that answer is a no, then we probably need to adjust your goal a little bit. That's not saying no to it forever. That's not saying like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to run a marathon because it doesn't fit in my life right now. That's just saying that, hey, maybe right now I don't have the time in my calendar to plan good marathon training and I want to stay happy and healthy. And so maybe right now we train for a 10K or a half marathon where you don't need as many hours in your week to train. If that answer is yes, I am ready, I'm willing, I'm able to do the variables required to meet my goal, then we need to ask, like, hey, is this something that's sustainable for me right now? Can I be consistent with this plan? Again, if that answer is no, how can you adjust that so that it is? Maybe we need to break those into micro doses. Maybe we need to back off on our goal and create a smaller step goal to get there. But it's important to be cognizant of that, because if we create a bomb plan that we can't be consistent with, it's not helpful and it creates discouragement. So we want to make sure that we're creating a plan that fits our goals, that fits our why, and it fits the reality of our life right now. But if we're ready and willing and able, and it's something that's sustainable for us right now, then it's time to work through all those details. So we're going to start out with resistance training, and we're going to go through this step by step. I'm going to feel free to pause the video as you need to. We're going to be moving through pretty quickly. And as always, if you guys have questions about this stuff, please reach out. Write a plan, have us look over it. We're happy to do that for you. But it's a lot of material. It's a lot of things to think about. It's not going to be perfect your first couple times through, and that's okay. You'll hear me say this over and over again here through the back half of the presentation. Like, your plan doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to create something that you can be consistent with, that you're excited to do, and that fits your goal. So with that, let's get going. So what does this process look like? First of all, we need to dial in how much time are you willing to give each session. We've already kind of harped on some of that, so it'll go pretty quickly. How many days, what days are available for training? How do we pick exercises? How do we organize those exercises in the session as a whole? And then what sets and reps do you use for your goal? And then how do you progress over time? So first couple steps are just the logistics of it. We've touched on some of this, but some strength specific stuff. How much time is available for training? If you only have about 30 minutes, 6 to 8 exercises for 12 to 20 total sets is pretty reasonable as long as you're not like sitting on your phone during your rest periods, that type of thing. 45 minutes, you can usually hit 8 to 10 exercises. And we'll talk about how to structure this so it all makes sense. Some of you may be thinking that's a lot in that time. And if you've done kind of traditional bodybuilding style lifting, upper, lower split, chest, back, legs, whatever style you take, that probably does sound like a lot, but we're going to talk about how to kind of make some sessions more efficient. If you've got 60 minutes, you can typically fit in 9 to 12. Um, and so we'll kind of unpack a lot of that. What days are available for training? If you've got 2 or 3 days, typically you're going to need to have one rest day in between. With three, sometimes you can do like strength train day, rest day, and then two back to back if you need to. But ideally you've got one day in between. If you're going to do 4 or 5 days, that's where it's going to become a little bit more important to alternate emphasis on your upper and lower body, or on different muscle groups. And so if we're going to do that, typically we want to have your hardest workout right before your rest days. So if we're going to train Monday, Tuesday, rest day on Wednesday, train Thursday, Friday, Tuesday and Friday might be my hardest workouts of the week. Why not one day? There are times where one day can be helpful, but in general, it's not enough, a frequent enough stimulus for change. I would rather see someone take, a couple of 20 or 30-minute sessions, heck, even 15-minute sessions, over 2 or more days in the week instead of just one day. And that just comes down to frequency. That's going to help with managing soreness as well. And overall, it's okay if it's not perfect. Like if those rest days aren't fitting where you want them, ideally, we can make that work with the program. If we need to train 2 days back to back, like not a big deal. We can make that happen. If we need to break stuff up more than you'd like, that's okay. Like let's figure out how to make it work with your current reality. Moving into exercise selection, this is where I usually have the most questions from people. We can make this pretty simple. Overall, we need to root it in your why, or your goal at least. So, what do you need to reach your goal or purpose? If my goal is to run a longer distance race, something, 10K or longer, it's probably not in my benefit to do a ton of upper body work and to put on a ton of muscle mass. If your goal is to run for a long time and or to run fast, if you're the larger a human you are and the more muscle mass we put on makes it harder to run. Like if you're having to carry more weight, that makes it harder on your body. And so there's a reason that long distance runners are skinny people, right? It's so that they can run faster. They don't have to carry that weight with them. Um, but if my goal is to put on some muscle mass and just look good, right? Then maybe I don't want to do a ton of stuff that's going to make me really skinny, right? I want to do stuff that helps me get that like tone, so where I'm cut, which has way more to do with nutrition. But I also don't want to do stuff where I'm, running for hours and burning a ton of calories, because that's going to make it really hard to add on that muscle mass. What exercise experience do I have? If you have never been in the weight room before, there's no need for you to go in and start doing clean and jerks and snatches where you're throwing the bar over your head, that type of thing, right? We want to keep it pretty vanilla. We want to keep it simple and really focus on mastering movement first. and then we can work your way into more complex things. Versus if you're like me and you've lifted for over 15 years of your life, then you can come in and you can do some pretty fun things. And that doesn't mean that everyone who's lifted for over 10 years of their life, right, gets to go in and do stuff, but you have a little bit more freedom the better mover you are, and that comes with a lot of experience. Do you have any injuries or a history of injuries that we need to work around? Like maybe you hurt that shoulder in high school and it's just never quite felt the same. We might need to work around that a little bit. There may be some stuff that we need to avoid. Chronic low back pain is one of those. Um, so deadlifts can be very good for back pain, but if they're done improperly, they can be really harmful. And sometimes, lifting a sumo with a really wide stance may feel good for some people, and for other people, it may not. So there may be some variations that we need to play with to find out what the right answer is for you. And then lastly, what do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? If you really hate doing upper body, I wouldn't say cut it out completely, but like maybe we don't do as much. Maybe we favor legs. If you really hate doing lower body, again, don't cut it out completely. Let's sprinkle it in, still get the benefit from that exercise, but let's bias towards your upper body. In general, we want to aim to train movements, not muscles, with the exception of bodybuilding. If you're just training to look good naked, then that's different. You can do some isolation stuff where you are training just the muscles. But overall, when we're looking at just like a good baseline, good foundation of training, we want to train movements, which we're going to talk about here in the next couple slides. Most people are generally going to need the same movement patterns, right? We all sit on the toilet. We all, open doors. We all do reach up into our cabinets, right? Um, and so we're going to talk about what those movement patterns are. But for you all specifically, and myself included, right? If we sit a lot, working our backside or posterior chain should be a bigger emphasis because it's on stretch all day when you're sitting. So if I'm sitting all the time, right, think my hips are flexed, my knees are flat on the floor, and so all those muscles are relaxed and lengthened, and so we need to help turn them on a little bit more, and that's going to help kind of balance us out from the sitting that we do. And then we can think of all of our movement patterns almost like a checklist, which is where we're headed next. So our movement pattern checklist. I'm going to give you a simple version, and then I'm going to unpack it a little more and make it a little more complicated, and then we're going to walk through an example. So big five. A lot of you have probably seen some of these before. We're going to squat. We're going to hinge, which is going to be like hamstring dominant, glute dominant stuff. We're going to push, pull, and then brace is going to be our like core, our trunk. Think shoulders to hips. Other things that we need to think about are what planes of movement are we working. So our movement planes are going to be our forward backward, which is our sagittal plane. My camera's backward, so I'm having a hard time with the angle of things. We're going to have our frontal plane, which is going to be side to side, and then our rotational, which is the transverse plane. So think about this type of movement. And then the other thing that we want to think about is the sidedness of exercises. So bilateral is, am I doing it with both arms, both legs, or unilateral, am I doing it with one leg, one arm, right? Okay, so now we can break it down a little bit farther. So we have our main movements, and we're going to break those down. So we're going to look at our lower body movements first. So we have our squat pattern, which again is going to be a little bit more quad hip flexor dominant. So think front side. Sometimes people will call them a lower body push or a quad dominant exercise. This is going to include squats, lunges, split squats, single leg squats, even like a leg extension would kind of fall into this. And so when I'm looking at my weekly plan, in general, I try to include, I want to make sure that I put the big check mark on my squat, but I also want to make sure I put a little check mark on I'm doing a bilateral movement, so a two-legged squat. So that would be like, a front squat, back squat, goblet squat, that type of thing. And then I also want to put little check mark on my unilateral, so a one-legged. So that can be a lunge variation, that can be a single leg squat, it can be a Bulgarian split squat. Those types of things where I'm biasing working one leg over the other. Same thing with my hinge patterns, or sometimes people will call these a lower body pull, or they're going to be like your hamstring or glute dominant. So regardless, we're like focusing on working on that backside of your lower body. So again, I want to include a bilateral, so that can be any of your deadlift variations. So think conventional, sumo, Romanian deadlift, hip thrust, glute bridges, that type of thing. And then I also want to make sure that I'm including a unilateral one, so a single leg one, where I'm doing it in a split stance, a true single leg, that type of thing. You get the idea, right? So with my lower body movements, I want to target a two-legged and a one-legged. You can make it more complicated and think about planes of motion going forward, backward, sideways, rotational. But that's like expert level, right? Moving into upper body, we can think about the same thing with the two arms or one arm, but we also want to include a little bit more with the plane of motion, because with our upper body stuff, we can push horizontally like a push up, right? Or we can do vertical, like a pull up, overhead press, that type of thing. So with our pushes, we want to include bench press, push up, something where we're pushing horizontally, and then we also want to do a vertical where we're pushing up overhead, or an incline where it's kind of that in between. And then with our pulls, again, we want to do the horizontal like a row, an inverted row where you're pulling yourself up to the bar, like in a laying down position. And then we also want to do a vertical like a lat pull down, a pull up, a chin up, that type of thing, because they're going to work different muscle groups. And then with our brace, our the plane of motion, so that forward, backward, sideways, rotational, is going to come into play quite a bit more here. So our flexion extension, we can do into flexion extension like a sit up or a Superman, or we can do an anti-flexion extension like a plank, where my goal is not to let my hips sag or to let my hips shoot up. Same thing with the lateral flexion. I can do like those side to side shrug things where I'm pushing into it. There's some argument I'll put it this way, from a functional strength perspective, moving into lateral flexion really doesn't do a ton for us. Resisting lateral flexion does a lot more. And the way you can think about that is like if you're walking, carrying something just on one side, your goal is to stay up straight. We don't want to like fall into that lateral flexion. Um, so your side planks are going to be a good example of this. And there's a million different variations you can do with side planks. One arm carries are going to be really good with that. Anti-rotation or rotation is going to be stuff where you are moving into rotation. So a rotational one would be like a Russian twist, or like one of those cable ones where you're moving it into rotation. You can do chops where you're coming high to low, or lifts where you're going low to high. Anti-rotation would be, if you guys have trained with me before, you've probably seen a pal-off press, or some people call it an anti-rotation press, where you're pushing out a cable, the cable's out to your side, and your goal is to not let it rotate you. You want to keep it in line with your belly button, right? So those are kind of the tick boxes that I want to put on. Kind of your extra credit brace ones are going to be intentionally including a carry or a drag. There's a ton of, like a sled drag. There's a ton of different things that you can do with those: one arm, two arm, um, offset, overhead, rack position, down at your sides, right? There's a million different variations you can do. But those are going to cause you to brace in a little bit different way, and they can be really helpful. And then your hip stabilizers. So think about like stuff with the mini bands where you're doing squats, walks, glute bridges, adding in like leg lifts, stuff like that. Those exercises that work those tiny little glute muscles and hip flexor muscles that you didn't know you had until they're about to cramp on you. Those are going to kind of fall into your trunk too. So think anything from like shoulder down to hip is going to fall into that brace category. Other things that are helpful to have, especially for you guys, shoulder stability, posture control. When we sit at our computer and we kind of like go into this forward roll shoulder position all the time, it's helpful to have some exercises that intentionally pull you into that open posture. And I would say if you're training a lot of upper body, be really cognizant of putting yourself into an open posture. So those are good to have. Other things that you can include, your mirror muscles, arms, bis, tris, delts, other shoulder muscles. For ladies, a lot of times glutes are a big thing. Sometimes people really want calves, that type of thing. You can include those as well. So, how do I organize my session? So, when we are organizing our session, our structure is going to include a warm up. Warm ups don't have to be very long. On the next slide, I believe it is, I'll talk about warm ups and cool downs really quick. But warm ups really don't have to be very long. If they're taking you much longer than 15 minutes, unless it's like a recovery day, you're doing them wrong. They really shouldn't take too much time. Uh, if you're going to include power work or like explosive work, it's best at the early part of your session when you're fresh. Then typically you're going to do your main movement. Compound lifts are just lifts that include multiple joints. So think about a squat. You're moving through your ankle, knees, hips, and your trunk is involved. Bench press, you're going stabilizing at the wrist, elbow, shoulder. Trunk is also involved. Deadlift, you get the idea, right? It's stuff that's moving through multiple joints. Typically, it's going to be the group of exercises that you're planning to lift the heaviest on for the day. And then your accessory movements are going to follow in after that. They can be jumbled a little bit. I will show you what that looks like in my example. But overall, you want to do the hardest things first, and then you're going to move into stuff that's more just for volume and upkeep after. If you're going to do conditioning in the same session, then that's going to typically go at the end unless your conditioning is the main priority for that day, where you're doing some like maybe speed work or like a tempo run, then your strength training might be secondary to that. And then at the end, you're going to do some recovery. Cardio sessions are going to follow a very similar structure. I don't think I included a slide like this with cardio. So with cardio, you'll have your warm up. Your warm up, depending on what you're doing, will be longer versus shorter. If you're doing something very pace intensive, high intensity, you might need a longer warm up. Versus if you're doing like a long, slow run that day, or just like hopping on a bike, you really don't need a ton of warm up for that. It's just really a good opportunity to work in some mobility. So in general, for when you're just like working out to be healthy, and even for like athletic performance or working towards a goal, each day is going to microdose different emphasis. So like you might include some lower and upper body. You might include some power and some strength or some hypertrophy, like some volume work, right? You're going to focus on different things within one session or at least within the week, even if one of them is the primary emphasis. So, one way that I like to set up workouts, and there's a million different ways to do this, right? Um, is maybe on Monday, I will do a strength day. Wednesday will be a volume day, and then Friday will be a power day, or I might have them in a different order, right? So, each of those days are kind of siloed in their emphasis, but I'm working on all of them throughout the week. Alternatively, I could do power, like I have it up above, where I'm going to do a little bit of power, and then strength is going to be my kind of meat and potatoes for that day, and then my hypertrophy is going to be a smaller dose for that day. So I'm touching on all three, but then I'm really emphasizing on strength. So it's important to touch on all of them to maintain those attributes. And part of that is like we don't wake up and be like, I think I'm only going to use strength today, or I'm only going to use power attributes today. That's not how we live our life, right? And that's not how, like, if you're training to be better at like recreational basketball, um, you aren't like, I think I'm just going to work on speed today and not jump height. That's not how stuff works within basketball. Yes, we're going to have to emphasize one over the other for our goal and for that type of thing. But we want to make sure that we're at least touching on things so that we're maintaining them and kind of maintaining and keeping them at a certain threshold so that we aren't decreasing them. So I'm putting in warm-ups and cool downs here because there really wasn't another good place. Um, Warm-ups and cooldowns are super important. Um, they are awesome places to work on mobility, prehab, rehab type stuff for injury prevention. And they really help. They just provide a time to mentally switch your brain over, right? Into, hey, like it's time for a workout. And again, they don't have to take very long. When I have a really short period of time, I have a 15-minute workout that I'll do. The first 4 minutes are my warm up. I do some You'll see kind of some of the components that I do as I talk through this, but I can fit that in within 4 minutes, more or less. Um, if I am doing like sprint work, like, yeah, it might take 15 to 20 minutes, and that's okay. Um, but they're going to be super important for helping transition that mental mindset. They're going to be super important for getting your body prepared, for getting your tissues warm, to be able to work so that you can move better and prevent injury, right? If I'm moving better, I'm going to be causing less stress to the places that don't need stress. So I'm going to make sure that I'm doing that well. And that it's going to help you get more benefit out of your workout. So muscles have to, all the different muscles fibers have to contract in an order. You have to contract the small muscle fibers before you can get to the big ones, which are really important for power and strength. So if I'm planning to go really heavy, your warm up sets are not going to tire you out. They're actually going to help you hit a bigger number, right? So what does good warm up look like? Um, Foam rolling and static stretching beforehand are optional. If one of your goals is to get more mobile, foam rolling and static stretching are going to be a big deal for you. With the foam rolling, you want to find a tight spot. You want to sit on it. You want to breathe, let it relax. Static stretching, you need to be holding those for I like doing them for a number of breaths so that you are focused on breathing and relaxing. 6 to 8 is usually a good range for a number of breaths. Time wise, you're looking at like 20 to 30 seconds. Um, the static stretching at the beginning, some people will say no, as long as you're doing like a good dynamic warm up following, it's not a big deal. Um, if you are wanting to work on mobility, it's actually kind of a game changer to put in just a little bit. It doesn't need to be a lot, but including some of that beforehand can really help. Neuromuscular coordination is just a really fancy way of saying warm, like move around and get your body warm. So if you've done a session with me, this is when we're doing the jogging, skipping, shuffling, that type of stuff where we're moving around. You might feel a little silly, and that's okay. But you just kind of want to do stuff that you did in like elementary PE, like in school. You want to do stuff that it's just kind of like running around, but it's easy and you're getting your body warm, you're moving, getting kind of loosened up. The other alternative, especially like if you're in a gym, is to do zone 2 cardio or like low intensity cardio. It doesn't even have to be very long, 2 to 5 minutes. A lot of times is enough to just kind of get you moving. If you want to dose in more cardio here, this is an awesome opportunity to throw in another 10, 15 minutes of low intensity cardio to help with that foundation. We'll talk about that later. Next step of my warm up is mobility. In general, you want to pick 3 to 5 exercises here. I almost always include ankle mobility, hip mobility, and T-spine or like upper back mobility, primarily rotation. So an example of that might be I'll do ankle mobility where I'm just pushing my knee as far as I can over my toes, keeping my heel flat on the floor, moving through my ankle as much as I can. Shin box is like hip switches, sitting on your butt, flipping your knees back and forth, moving through the hip. T-spine rotation, I might lay on my side and do a rotate around, open. Sometimes people call them open books, that type of thing. I might pick two different types of lunges, add in a reach or a rotation just to kind of get you moving. Stability is going to be your next step. In general, 2 to 5 exercises. If you have mini bands, these are really helpful here. You can do squats, the walks with them, glute bridges with them. Even body weight glute bridges are a good add here. For upper body, you can do bent over Ys, Cuban presses. I do them in a bent over position. If you don't know what a Cuban press is, YouTube it. A lot of times they'll be standing up straight, but I like to do them in a bent over position to target more of the rotator cuff instead of the big delt muscles. Eyes, Ys, Ts, that type of thing are going to fit in there as well. And then my last part of my warm up is going to be my specific movement prep or stuff that is explosive. So if you're not training explosiveness, I would highly recommend including a couple of basic jumps or landings here so that you're getting some of that power. Again, I mentioned it before, is really important as we age. But that can be helpful for muscle activation as well. And then just kind of maintaining some of that explosiveness as we get older, or if you don't train it at all. So examples of that you can do if you've done it in a group with me. I'll do like a partner reactive snap down. So you'll do some like jump rope jumps without a jump rope, some pogos. And then one person will go into a quarter squat as fast as they can, and then your partner has to react to you, right? So even stuff like that, it can be fun, it can be silly. Within a group, it makes it a little more game-like. If I'm doing a high strength day, I might work in some of my warm-up strength sets into this part, where maybe I'm doing like some pogo jumps for my ankle and foot health, but then I'm gonna pair those with some of my lighter warm-up sets just to kind of move and get under the bar or whatever lift I'm doing that day, right? For upper body, med ball stuff can be really great here too. If I'm doing a run, that's where, if I'm doing like a high pace focus day, uh, that's where a lot of my running drills and stuff are going to go in. If I'm doing a long, slow day, then this part becomes a little bit less important, and I might just move into my run. For cooldowns also don't have to take a long time. You also shouldn't neglect cooldowns. Cooldowns are really important for, again, that like mental switch back to your day, but then also really helpful for when your body's warm. That's the best opportunity to work on mobility. And it's another really good place to work in some prehab rehab for injury prevention, injury rehab type stuff. So you can pick 2 to 4 dynamic stretches. So take 2 to 4 of the things that you did in your warm up and do a set or 2 of them at the end of your workout. Some people really like to stretch at the end. Again, if you're someone who really needs to work on mobility, static stretching where you're just holding a stretch is helpful here. Again, 6 to 8 breaths or 20 to 30 plus seconds. To really get good mobility, you need to be holding it for a good chunk of time. Foam rolling is really awesome here, but not required. And you can also tack in some low intensity exercise here too, where you're helping your heart rate return closer to baseline, something that you can recover from really well. So that's warm ups and cool downs. So we talked about how to organize warm up and through your priority work and then your accessory work and then into your cool down. So what does it look like throughout the week when we're picking where to put each of our exercises? I get the question a lot about like, hey, like, I do a chest, a back, arms and then one day of legs, or I do a upper body, lower body. And so, is it helpful to do splits or is it better to do full body? I'm biased towards full body. That comes a lot from my sports performance background. Um, and back to kind of what I was talking about, like we don't just use our upper body when we play basketball, right? We use our full body when we play basketball. Or name your sport, right? And so, whether you do a split or a full body is going to be dependent on your goal and on your frequency of training. If you're only training 2 days per week, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to get benefit from doing a split workout, regardless of whether you're splitting that upper, lower, or between chest, back, legs, and you're only getting each body part once every 2 weeks. You're just not going to get the frequency you need to get the adaptation. If you're only lifting 2 days per week, you need to be doing full body. At 3 days per week, I would still recommend full body or at least like upper, lower, full, so that you're hitting each body part or each muscle group at least twice per week. If you're not hitting each muscle group at least twice per week, it's not worth your time. Well, that's not true. Anything is better than nothing, but um, it's going to be more worthwhile if you're hitting 2 times per week. Our body isn't going to grow muscle, and that doesn't mean you're going to get jacked, but um, if that's not your goal, right? Um, but if you're not hitting each thing at least twice per week, you're not going to get the benefit. There's not enough stimulus for your body to get stronger, to grow muscle, to do that type of thing. And we'll talk about how to shape variables for different goals, but you need to be hitting each of those at least twice. So most people actually benefit a lot more from a full body. We'll talk about how to structure that a little bit. Supersets are really helpful. Not enough people use them. I think they're afraid that it's going to make you too fatigued, but they actually really help make your session really effective, and you can structure them in a way that aren't going to over fatigue. So they're going to help make training effective and efficient. You can shape them to give you a conditioning like stimulus if you would like, where you have very little rest period. You can also still use them within a power or strength, where you use your supersets more to focus on mobility or maybe some stability to help support those exercises, where you're not getting really a conditioning stimulus, but you're still using your rest time actively. It's going to help reduce the amount of time needed in the gym, right? If I do 9 exercises and I have to rest, work, rest for all of them for 2 to 3 sets or more across the board, right? That's going to take me hours. Nobody has time for that. Versus if I am putting 3 exercises in a superset, a triset, right? That's going to be, I can all of a sudden knock out 9 sets in the time that it would have taken me to do like 2 exercises before. And so I'm packing in a whole lot more, right? You can do as few as 2 exercises together within a superset. If you're getting beyond 4 exercises, it starts to become more circuit-like, which that can be helpful if your goal is muscular endurance or metabolic conditioning and you want that conditioning effect. However, more than 4 really isn't going to be great for strength, power, and hypertrophy. My go-to is 2 to 3, most often 3. And so most common things to pair together are going to be like your pushes and your pulls, or an upper body, lower body. When I do sets of 3 exercises paired together, I'll either do a push, pull, and then a core or mobility, or I'll do an upper, lower, core, or mobility. It just depends on how many days a week that person is training, and what their goals are. But that's kind of how I will put stuff in there. So let's look at an example. We're just going to do a 2-day because that's what fits on a slide. So I'm just going to walk you through how I would write a workout. So I'm going to put in my primary emphasis first. So on day 1, if I'm doing someone who is just training for general strength, and we're doing a 2 days per week full body strength training plan. One day I'm going to emphasize a lower body push or my squat pattern. So that's what the goblet squat is. That's just a squat with a dumbbell. And then my day 2, I'm going to do something that's going to focus more on the backside. So I'm going to use a hex bar deadlift. Other things I could put in here are like an RDL, a conventional deadlift, a hip thrust, something like that, where I'm pushing something that I can do pretty heavy, but I'm gonna focus on the backside. So those are the ones I put in first. After that, I'm going to put in some primary upper body movements. So I'm going to do those in my second block of exercises, my second like superset of exercises in that day. So on my day 1, I'm going to do a press. I'm choosing to do a landmine press, which is you stick like a barbell in a corner, or some places have like a sleeve that the bar slides into. And then you can do it standing or kneeling, and it's going to be more like an incline type pattern. So more of a vertical press. And then on my day 2, if I can do pull-ups, I'm going to do pull-ups. If not, I might do an inverted row. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in my secondary exercises. So I've got them color coded based on their kind of category of stuff. So the blue is my squat pattern. So I've got my, on my day 1, I have my primary squat pattern. And then on my day 2, I have my accessory squat pattern, which in this case is going to be a lateral lunge. My hinge pattern, or my like glute hamstring dominant pattern, on day 2, I've got my hex bar. And then on my day 1, I've got my accessory single arm, single leg RDL, which is like the exercise that I showed you guys in the intent slide. For my upper body movements, I have my primary strength one on day 2 in the inverted row or the pull-up. So this is my pull. And then on day 1, I have my single arm 3-point row. So my primary, like my pull-up, is more of a vertical pull. And then my accessory over on day 1 with the 3-point row is a horizontal pull. And then for my push pattern, on my day 1, I have that landmine press, which is my like an incline angle type press. You could also do just like an incline press. And then on my day 2, I'm going to do a push up with 3 seconds down. It's probably going to be higher reps. So I've covered my main upper and lower body lifts. I've got double leg and single leg. And then I'm going to throw in my core. And then I'm going to put in any accessory stuff. I could get through this workout routine, depending on how many sets and reps and stuff I'm doing, anywhere from like 30 to 45 minutes. So if I'm going through my movement checklist, I've got my squat pattern in the blue. I've got my bilateral in the goblet squat, my unilateral in the lateral lunge. For my hinge pattern, I have my bilateral in the hex bar deadlift and my unilateral in the single arm, single leg RDL. So that's in the green text. For my push, I'm looking for horizontal and vertical. So I get my horizontal from the push up, my vertical from the landmine press. For my pull, I'm looking for my horizontal and vertical pull. So I'm going to get my horizontal pull from the 3-point dumbbell row up there, A2 in the orange, and then my vertical pull from pull up. I recognize inverted row is a horizontal one. It's still a good builder for pull ups, so I'll still sometimes use it. You could also do like a lat pull down for someone who can't do pull ups. And then when I think about my brace, I'm looking for my sagittal plane, so my forward, backward, my frontal plane, my side to side, and then my rotational plane. And then I included hip here as well. So for sagittal, I've got my hollow hold. For frontal plane, my side to side, I've got my side plank. For my rotation, I've got an anti-rotation pal-off press. And then for my hip stability, I'm going to do a lateral band walk, which is just a mini band at your knees, shins, or ankles, and you're going to walk sideways. It kills your booty. And then my extras, On my day one, I chose to add in some extra shoulder work. So I've got some lateral raises, as well as some reverse flies for the rear delt. And then on my day two, I chose some mobility and posture stuff. So my Cuban press, again, if you don't know what it is, YouTube it. I'm going to do it bent over. And my plan to help target my rotator cuff, and then my deep squat breathing is going to be to help me work on getting into my deep squat, as well as I can use that for just like some posture, hip mobility type stuff. So we've got those checked off as well. Next step is going to be selecting what sets and reps we are going to do. So this is going to primarily be uh, for what our goal is. So if our goal is muscular endurance, so this is going to pair really well with your long distance running, um, as well as like long distance cycling. Think about any time you've got an athlete or your goal is to do something for a long time. This is going to be helpful for those types of goals. Um, so, in general, if that's your goal, you're going to be doing 1 to 2 sets, and generally we want to be 12 or north of 12 on the reps end. I've given you some percentage of 1 rep max. It's okay if you don't know your 1 rep max. I'm going to go over that on the next slide. And not every exercise is going to have a 1 rep max, right? So if I'm not going to have a 1 rep max bicep curl. That's silly. I mean, if you want to do that, go for it. Just don't hurt yourself, right? Be careful. We don't need any popped biceps, but in general, like your primary lifts are going to be the ones that have the 1 rep max. Nobody really needs to do a 1 rep max unless your goal is truly like to increase your 1 rep max for like powerlifting, that type of thing. But it's just kind of a helpful and common reference point in the literature. If your goal is hypertrophy, or that's just a fancy name for muscle gain, you're going to be doing 3 to 6 sets in general, 6 to 12 reps. Moderate intensity is what that 60 to 80% is going to equate to. General strength is a term that I use a lot. It's not a textbook term, but it's just kind of that like I just want to be healthy type stuff. 2 to 4 sets is going to be ideal for that, and 5 to 10 reps. Max strength 2 to 8 sets, 1 to 5 reps. So we want that to feel pretty dang heavy when we do that. And then power is going to have the most variation in general. 1 to 4 sets, you can go more. I've frequently done more. But if you're doing more, you're going to be doing like single reps. So reps are going to be under 5 for that. And your intensity or your load, not necessarily, those are intense movements if you're training power, but your load can be very little to decently heavy depending on what type of power you're going for. It's important to note that um, if my goal is hypertrophy and I have the capability to squat with a 80-pound dumbbell, if I go in and I do 3 sets of 12 with a 20-pound dumbbell, I'm not going to get bigger just because I did 3 sets of 12. I have to be doing a load that's going to cause the appropriate challenge. So for muscular endurance, those sets you should be able to finish those. You should be fatigued at the end, but you should be able to finish those sets. For muscle hypertrophy, I want to come as close to failing that set as possible. So even if there's been some really cool research that's actually come out that says that it's much more about the um, coming close to failure than it is the volume. So people are getting muscle mass by doing like very heavy sets, of 3 to 5 reps or so, but they're failing their set. And so it's more about the failure or coming close to failure for hypertrophy than it is what actual work you're doing. So make sure that when you are selecting what weight you're using, the intensity, the amount of weight or resistance that you're going to use is going to be the primary driver for adaptation. The sets and reps should be limited by the intensity. Yes, these are kind of what you'll find. The sets and reps make a difference, but you need to make sure that you're changing the resistance that you use for the goal that you use. So we're going to dive into that here on this slide. Um, so this one's all about the intensity. How much weight should you use? So if you don't know your 1 rep max, I'm giving you some like alternative ways to think about it. So for muscular endurance, we're looking at 50 to 60% of your 1 rep max. So if your 1 rep max is 100 pounds, we're looking at 50 to 60 pounds. Um, for this, if you're thinking about how many reps do I have left in the tank, which is going to be known as reps in reserve, you want to have at least 2 to 3 reps left in the tank. On a scale of 1 to 5 or of 1 to 10, excuse me, you want to be shooting for a 3 to 5, probably closer to a 5. And your thought process when you're going through your set when and selecting your weight should be like you're positive that you can complete the set, but that you'll be tired at the end. For hypertrophy or muscle gain, if your 1 rep max is 100 pounds, that means we're looking for a 60 to 80 pound lift for 6 to 12 reps in general. Your reps in reserve are going to be -1 to 1. So either you're not finishing the set or you're finishing with only about 1 rep left in the tank. So again, it's about coming close to failure on that. Your rate of perceived exertion should be a 7 or an 8 out of 10, if not a 9. And when you're going through the set, it should kind of be like I don't know if I can finish the set with this weight, but I'm sure that I'll be within a rep or two. I feel like Jello at the end, like, so these are the sets because of the combination of the amount of weight that you're doing and the amount of reps that you're doing. You should walk away and like not sure if your legs are gonna collapse after your set because you just used them so hard, right? Or your arms. Um, for general strength, just kind of for Joe Schmo, I just want to be healthy type thing. Um, Again, if 1 rep max is 100 pounds, we're looking 70 to 80% of that. Reps in reserve, you should leave 2 to 3 reps left in the tank. So it should feel hard, but you should be pretty confident that you can complete the set. We're looking for a 6 to 8 out of 10 on how hard it feels. Again, you can finish the set, but like it should feel tough towards the end. For max strength, we're looking at over 80% of your 1 rep max. Reps in reserve 0 to 2. So we don't necessarily want to fail these sets, but they should feel very difficult. You should be able to make the set, but really not much more. For your rate of perceived exertion, we're looking at 8 or 9. Like these reps should feel freaking hard, right? As you're going through, like you should pick up your weight and be like, man, that feels heavy, but I can complete the set. I don't walk away from these feeling super jello-y. There's going to be some variation based on, is this just a day that I need to hit the strength and I'm going to hit it later in the week? Or is this my final day of the week and I have a couple days to recover? If it's early in the week and you have a lot more training to do, then that's when I want to lean more towards like 2 reps or so left in the tank. Very confident you can complete the set versus if it's the end of the week and it's my like heavy push day, then that's when I want to have like that 0 reps left in the tank, cannot do more. I maybe even didn't finish my set, and that's okay. There's going to be some variation there. But in general, if we're working on strength, you want it to feel heavy. For power, there's going to be that really wide range of your percent 1 rep max. Your reps in reserve should be quite a bit higher, 3 to 4 reps left in the tank, because we want to feel lots of pop on our reps for those. your rate of perceived exertion is going to feel anywhere between 3 and 6-ish out of 10. So like if you're thinking about like doing a jump, right? Like I could jump a lot of times. I may not be able to put the same power output into that jump every time, but I have a lot left in the tank. And I need to feel explosive when I do the movement. If I don't feel explosive, you're not training power. You need to be moving the weight fast. You need to be moving your body fast. Um, that's what we're looking at for power. So that's how I go through and I select my exercises. That's how I dictate how many sets and reps I'm doing and kind of what weight I'm picking when I'm going through my training. Um, so I don't think I did a slide where I go through and assign the reps and sets. But in general, your exercises, like my A1 and my B1 from my example, feel free to run it back and take a look, um, are going to be the ones where I am focusing on, let me get a little pen here, where I'm focusing on either my max strength. That's not a pin. Here we go. My A1, B1 are going to be my max strength or my power. And then my other stuff, let me change colors, is going to fall into more like general strength, hypertrophy, or even muscle endurance. Um, so I'm going to put the stuff that needs more emphasis first on the max strength, power, stuff where I need to be a little bit more fresh so I can put a lot of effort into it. And then my general strength, hypertrophy, muscle endurance, that type of stuff is going to fall in later or as accessory work, so that it doesn't matter if I'm fatigued for those as much. Some fatigue is fine, versus the max strength and the power. I need to be a little bit more fresh for those. So that's how I put together all the pieces. Okay, so then we're going to move into how do we progress from week to week. So when I build my workouts, let's say I've got my lift for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm going to keep those same lifts on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 3 to 6-ish weeks. Okay. Um, 4 fits into a month easily, right? But 3 to 6 is kind of my range. It's depends on how bored you get, depends on your goal, that type of thing. Um, So each of those 3 to 6 week blocks is going to have an emphasis. So maybe my emphasis is going to be max strength. Um, and then I'm going to take that strength, and then in my next block, I'm going to transition that to build on power. It's going to be dependent on your goal, unless you're just doing kind of general health. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. I'm going to give you just kind of the textbook basic, hey, this is really good and effective type thing, so that you've got a place to start. So my general flow is that initially I'm going to work on muscle endurance slash like my movement foundation. Muscle endurance is really helpful for just teaching how to move really well because you're doing a ton of reps, right? You have a ton of time to explore what good movement feels like. So once I am moving really well and I've got some good like baseline movement, some good muscle endurance, then I'm going to transition into hypertrophy and or general strength. So if you aren't wanting to put on a lot of muscle mass, shoot more for that general strength range. If you do want to put on some muscle mass, this is a really great time to do that. I'm going to use the mass that I just built to build more strength. Muscle mass and strength don't grow together linearly. Um, Bodybuilders can be very strong, but they are not always very strong. They look very strong. They look ripped, right? But they're not always like the strongest humans, right? There's a reason that powerlifters don't all look like bodybuilders, okay? Um, Powerlifters are usually look kind of like big fat dudes. You look at them and you're like, you aren't healthy. But they're really freaking strong, right? And they need that to support the weight. That doesn't mean that you're also going to get like fat if you do max strength work. We're looking at max strength for you, not world's strongest man, right? So, muscle endurance, movement foundation to hypertrophy or general strength. adding a little bit more strength to it, adding a little bit of muscle size or tone. And then we're going to use that to build our max strength. So we're going to get really heavy. And then from there, strength is a really good foundation for power. Some people will train power, others won't. I'm a big fan of training power. Again, biased. I was a power sport athlete. But I think it's really helpful for a lot of things, but especially as we age. And just for like, think about if you fall, right? You have to move quickly to catch yourself. Or if you trip or something like that, right? Like you're gonna have to step forward and catch yourself and decelerate. That is an element of power. And so that's what we're looking to enhance our body's capability to train that. So ways to progress. We can progress volume, so we can increase the total amount of work that we're doing. We can increase the amount of resistance, so how much weight is on the bar or what weight of dumbbell am I using? We can progress our contraction speed. So the transition from strength to power is a really good example for that. My resistance may actually decrease. I may go to a lower resistance, but I'm going to move that weight way faster, right? My goal is to move that really fast. We can challenge our exercise complexity. So I can do a split squat where it's a lunge type movement, but instead of stepping into my lunge each time, my feet are going to stay set. And then the progression of that would be to go into a lunge where I have to step into that position every time and find that position every time. That's going to be a more complex movement. And then I can go from that to a walking lunge where then I'm traveling, right? That movement becomes even more there's a more of a balance element. It becomes more complex. And then I can also progress workout density. And so that's going to challenge more that like conditioning effect that you're going to get where I'm trying to push more work into a smaller amount of time. So other things to consider when we're thinking about progression, a well-rounded program should include a variety of movements performed consistently over time. We don't want to change things like every time that we go to the gym because then your body never adapts. Adaptation takes time. Um, we want to progress things strategically. So some helpful things with that. Recognize one, it does take time. Your body's not you're not gonna get like stupid strong in the course of 2 weeks. It takes like months, sometimes even years for people to hit like huge strength goals, right? And it depends on how big of a jump or like what your specific goal is, right? But it does take time. Um, so as you're looking at your workouts, your main lifts, so think about like your squat pattern, your deadlift pattern, those types of things, they can stay the same upwards of 3 months. Not that you can't change them faster than that, but um, your body can handle those. It doesn't need a ton of variation on those. You have a lot of room for adaptation most often with those. You can leave those in there for a good chunk of time. Accessory movements can change every 3 to 6 weeks, but it's also okay to stay the same for 2 to 3 months unless you're bored or something isn't working. Um, and so when I write a new program, or like a new phase, like a new month of workouts for someone, so I'll write their initial one. And then what I do is I make a copy of their original one, and then each day I go in and I change maybe 2 to 3 exercises, or maybe I'll switch the order that stuff is in the week. But my goal is not to overhaul everything. I make a few changes. I ask, like, hey, is there anything that you're really bored with, or that type of thing, and then we will transition that over. If you're still adapting, like you're still able to increase weight or you're able to increase reps, there's no need to change unless you're bored with it. But if you're still seeing adaptation from it, that means that that stimulus is still working for you. Versus if you've plateaued, then maybe it's time to challenge your body in a different way with either a new exercise type or we need to change something about it. But if you are still able to increase weight and or reps, then there's no need to change that exercise until you've kind of plateaued. And then I hinted at this before, but our goal is progression, not total switches. So change or progress 2 to 4 exercises for each workout every 3 to 6 weeks to help you stay excited about workouts, but also practicing consistent movement. Sometimes that change doesn't need to be a complete change in exercise. Sometimes I will just change the stance that I'm doing it in. An example of that is I can do a overhead press, a single arm overhead press from a tall kneeling position, which means that I'm on both my knees. Um, and then I can do it from a half kneeling position, which means I'm just on one knee. And then I can transition that to a standing position. And then I can transition that to like a split stance position where I'm in like a lunge position and having to push overhead. And so that's going to change that movement and change how my body has to stabilize and interact with the other movement muscle groups. And so it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of that exercise. It can be just like a tweak in it. I might add a complexity to change how my body interacts with that exercise. So that is strength training. Next up, we are moving into cardiovascular training. I promise it'll be a little bit faster. I know we are far into this sucker. All right, so our overview is going to be very similar for cardio training. Again, we need to consider how much time you're able to give, what days are available for training, what tools do we use, how do we progress over time. So looking at our logistics, again, same type of thing. How much time is available for each training session? That's going to dictate what tools you can plug in where. And then how many days and what days are available for training. The best example of this is like if you're doing a training plan that requires a long run, your long run probably needs to be on a weekend or a day that you're not working, so that you have the amount of time to do your long run. Different things are going to take different amounts of time. So let's talk about some tools that we can use for cardio training. So in general, when we are thinking about cardio training, I like to bucket things in like 3 different buckets. There are a lot of different ways you can do this. This is just kind of a simple, easy way that I like to think about it. So we have our aerobic base. So our goal with that is going to be to improve cardiovascular efficiency. In other words, our heart is going to be working less for more amounts of work. And we're going to do that by training in lower heart rate zones. Our second bucket is going to be continuous capacity. Um, Again, that's just a term that I use that I think is helpful. Um, you'll see stuff similar to that in textbooks, but probably not exactly. Our goal for that is to be able to improve our race pace or our test pace, and to be able to put pieces of efficiency and our capacity or our pace together. And then our third bucket is going to be that pace or like our capacity work. Like how hard can we actually work is kind of the target of that one. And so our goal is to increase our overall like pace capacity by pushing your body to train in higher heart rate zones. And we're going to have to use rest periods to accomplish that. So back over to our aerobic base, examples of what that looks like. Primarily, this is going to be your steady state, your long, slow distance run. In general, your effort level for like how hard do I feel as I'm running right now is really only going to be like a 5 to a 6. You're looking at this and you're like, I can sustain this for a really long time. In general, your target heart rate is going to be at like a 2 to 3 for an extended period. Um, in general, we're going to do this for 20 minutes or more, or we might segment it throughout the week. Like I mentioned way back up when we talked about planning out our week. I had some low intensity cardio paired with the strength training in my example. That might be like just 10 to 15 minutes when I do my strength training, right? And so I'm splitting it up throughout the week. This type of training is gonna help build up your cardio and your health foundation, and it's gonna teach proper fuel utilization, or substrate is the fancy word for that, utilization. So an example of this would be a 20-minute bike ride in heart rate zone 2. Obviously, you can do a ton of things at low intensity cardio, but that's just the example that I had. For our continuous capacity, tempo runs are going to be kind of the primary tool for that, one of the primary tools for that. When we do our tempo runs, your effort level needs to be pretty high. Those runs should be like 7 out of 10, 7 to 8 out of 10 hard. Um, a tempo run is just going to be a continuous run or excuse me, bout of cardio, whether you're biking, rowing, swimming, pick your tool, at or near your target pace. So if my goal is to run a passing PFA, then I'm going to look at my chart, look at my target pace, and that's the pace that I want to be at. Or it's going to be like, hey, I want you to go out and do this 1.5 for time, or 2 mile run for time, right? These types of runs are going to build your ability to run at or near your threshold for several minutes. This is going to be the exact skill that's required when you run your PFA, regardless of whether that's the 1.5 mile, 2 mile, or the hammer. This is also going to be the skill that is going to give you the best outcome when you're recording your VO2 max if you're using the watch. And then like races like 5Ks, that type of thing are also going to be helpful. And so an example of this could be a 1 mile run at or slightly faster than your desired 2 mile pace. So if your target pace is a 12-minute 2 mile, so you're running 6-minute mile pace, then my target for my tempo run might be to run between a 5:55 and 6-minute 1 mile. Uh, Another tool that we can use that I really like is a continuous run plus a walk run. Um, Again, this one should feel like a 7 or 8 out of 10 overall when we're doing the running. And so what this looks like is you're going to do a continuous bout um, plus an additional easy to moderate interval for a total time or distance. So I'll give an example of what that looks like. But this is a really helpful tool that's able to increase how far you can run continuously. So an example for myself, I am not a runner. Um, I will train for a 5K, and that's the longest distance I will ever go. I don't have any desire to do more, and I'm okay with that. And so I have to build up to be able to run 3 miles continuously. And so for me, I might go out and I'll run 1 mile continuously, and then I'm going to walk for a quarter of a mile, and then I'll run for a quarter of a mile and I'll just repeat that quarter mile on, quarter mile off pattern until I hit 3 miles total. And then over time, I will add to my 1 mile. So maybe in 2 to 3 weeks, I'll bump up my 1 mile continuous to 1.25. And then I'll still run that out for 3 miles total until I can run the whole thing. And I'm pairing that with other workouts as well. But that is a tool that you can use to expand the capacity that you can run continuously without just trying to run farther. We'll come back to these bottom two here at the end. For our pace or our capacity work, our primary tools are going to be intervals. So we can do aerobic intervals where they're going to be a little bit longer intervals. Our effort level is going to be a little bit lower, but we're still focusing on working at a higher pace. So our effort level for aerobic intervals is going to be between a 6 and a 7. Um, our longer intervals can be long is going to be relative, right? If running 30 seconds at a time is hard, your longer interval might be 30 seconds. If you can go and run over a mile continuously, your longer interval may be closer to 3 or 4 minutes at a time. It just kind of depends on what pace we're trying to hit and the total duration that you're trying to go. Um, but our goal is that those intervals are going to be at a moderately challenging pace. So we don't want to be going super fast compared to our race pace. But we do want to be going at a pace that's slightly faster. And then we're going to break those up with walk or a lower intensity bout. Our work to ratio work to rest ratio can vary widely depending on your goal and your fitness level. If you're less fit, you're going to need a longer rest ratio versus if you are more fit, you can do a shorter rest interval. The goal is that with these, you feel pretty ready to go by the time your rest interval comes around. Maybe a little less so by the end of your run, but in general, like you're like, yep, I just need a little bit of a break and now I'm ready to go again. And so this is going to allow you to extend the amount of time that you can work at a faster pace. So if, again, I'm just going to use easy math. If my target pace is a 6-minute pace for a 12-minute 2 mile, then and I have a really hard time sustaining a 6-minute pace, then I'm going to maybe run at 6 minutes for 6-minute pace for 2 minutes at a time. And then I'm going to walk for a minute. And then, so at the top of every 3-minute mark, I'm going to run my 2 minutes at my 6-minute pace until I hit my 3 miles total. So 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, and I'm intentionally working at race pace or maybe even slightly faster so that I can extend that amount of time that I'm able to run at that faster pace. Our second tool for pace and capacity work is going to be your high intensity intervals. Um, these are a really helpful tool, but a very intense tool. Really, we shouldn't be doing these much more than 1 to 2 times per week. If you're doing them all the time, you're going to burn yourself out and overtrain. Our effort level for these is going to be 8 to 9 out of 10, so very hard. For these, we want short intervals. Typically, we're looking at a minute or less at a very high intensity with short breaks. Traditional HIIT is less than a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. Up to 1-to-1 is you're still going to get about the same benefit. And so these are nice because you can do a lot of like cross training stuff with med balls, kettlebells, battle ropes, that type of stuff. It doesn't have to just be cardio, but it can just be cardio. And so these are going to help increase your overall work and pace capacity as well as just that like mental grit that is required for digging in when it's hard. And so these are a good example of this is going to be 30 seconds of work, 30 seconds of rest, and you're going to do 6 to 8 rounds. It should feel super hard. It should be hard to finish, is kind of the goal here. Again, 6 to 8 rounds at 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off isn't going to take very long. So these are great ones to sneak in at the end of a strength training session or on days when you don't have very much time, but you're just ready to like work really hard. A tool that is going to bridge the continuous capacity and the pace or like pace capacity work is going to be repeats. And we can shift these based on our work to rest period. So our effort level for these again is going to be that like 8 to 9 level. So they're going to feel pretty freaking hard. And we're going to be looking for 3 to 10 repetitions of a length that's shorter than your race. Oops. But we're going to be running them at your race pace or faster. So it's a type of interval, but it's very, I would say more prescriptive with like your pace than some of the other intervals. Typically, you're going to have a 2 to 5 minute rest, and we're looking at like a 1-to-1 to 1-to-6 work to rest ratio. So if you are using repeats for pace benefits, you need to be at a 1-to-4 to 1-to-6 work to rest ratio. You want that longer rest period to be able to maintain the pace. If you can't maintain the pace, you're not working speed, you're working capacity. So that rest period becomes really important when you're wanting to improve your ability to actually run faster. However, if you are wanting to perform or to improve your ability, your capacity ability, then that's where that shorter rest period is going to be of more benefit, where you're more in that like 1-to-1 to 1-to-3 range, where it feels really sucky and your legs feel jello-y, Those are going to be helpful for that like grit factor when you're running, and just being able to really like expand how long you can run the pace, kind of like the aerobic intervals, but with shorter bouts. So an example of this is like the Norwegian 4x4, where you do 4 bouts of 4 minutes at 80 to 95% of your heart rate max. So very high intensity, and 3 minutes rest between intervals. So you can do this with running, you can do this with biking, rowing, you name it. And then our final tool, and again, this is not all inclusive, this is just ones that are really helpful, is going to be fartlek training. This term is used a lot, and a lot of times it's just used as a blanket statement for intervals, and that's not what it is. So fartlek training can be shifted for a lot of different focus, which is why it spans all 3 categories. So our effort level can be anywhere from a 6 to 8 out of 10. Fartlek training fartlek is just speed play in Swedish. That's how it gets its name. And so it is unstructured interval training, essentially. So you're going to go for a continuous run or bike or whatever tool you're using. And we're using unstructured undulations in your pace or your intensity. A lot of times these are done like with hills. So a lot of times it's like a hill workout, because you're naturally going to modify your pace a little bit more on uneven terrain or like up and down terrain. And so this tool is really helpful to blend your endurance and your speed work together, based on yourself, as well as the environment. So you can do it where it's just like, hey, you're going to go on a 20-minute fartlek run, with really no guidance, or you can dial it in a little bit more, where we then add like, hey, like I want you to stay steady around a 6 out of 10 effort level, but then I want you to do, 3 8 out of 10 intensity levels for at least 1 minute. So the runner can choose when they do those based on how they're feeling, based on the terrain. But in general, it's just kind of loose. It's kind of based on feel. Like trail running is a really great way to do this. You can go when you're feeling good and free, you can run a little faster. And when you're like feeling a little tired, you can go a little slower. It's just kind of that playing with pace. And so if I want to use this to bias my aerobic base, that green category, then I want to keep my overall pace quite a bit slower. I want things to feel really easy. And in general, I want my heart rate to be pretty low, like zone 2, 3. If I'm using it for my continuous capacity, I'm going to push my pace, my average pace a little bit more. It might be closer to a 7 out of 10. And then I might have a couple bouts where I'm at like an 8 or a 9, as well as a couple bouts where I'm a little easier. But in general, like I want to kind of push a little bit harder. And then if I'm using this for the orange category for my like pace capacity, then I want to be pushing pretty hard, and I want to include some very distinct parameters where I still get to choose where I do them in my run, but maybe I have a bigger handful of number of intensity, like higher intensity bouts that I do within that run. So those are some tools that we can use. So what does this look like when we actually start to put it together? I think the easiest way to do it is to show you guys some examples. So if I am someone who is planning on doing 2 cardio sessions per week, this is going to be best for people who are shorter on time, who are just starting a cardio routine, or people like me who really don't enjoy doing cardio, but know that I need to do it, or for people who want to prioritize a heavier strength training regimen. So the priorities for someone who's doing 2 days per week is going to be to include moderate or high intensity work at least 1 times per week, if not 2. Some like extra credit type stuff that you can do to sneak in extra cardio. Man, walk every day. Walk at least 4 days a week. Walking is great for you. It gets you outside. It gets you some low intensity stuff. Um, Other ways that you can sneak in some of that steady state or that low intensity stuff is by including it in your warm up or your cool down for resistance training, like I gave in the example way back. Um, and then, or you can include like a hit finisher on a resistance training day and then do like a low intensity day and a moderate intensity day in your week. So an example of what this could look like, I might do a 2 week rotating schedule where my week one, I'm going to do a steady state day and a tempo run day. I've given some specific examples of what that could look like. Week two, I might do like a fartlek training day with an endurance focus. And then I will do some aerobic intervals on that second day. And again, I've given you an example of what that could look like. What if I bump it up to 3 sessions per week? This is going to be better for individuals who have between 20 and 60 minutes to give 3 days a week just for cardio. A lot of times people who are motivated to make a change and are just starting a cardio routine, this is a good schedule for them. Or for individuals who want to balance with 2 to 3 days of resistance training, especially we can pair stuff with strength training if we need to. Our priorities for this is going to be to include a low, moderate, and high intensity day. And we want to make sure that we are covering gaps and goals. So for someone like myself, if I'm going to go run, I'm going to go run fast. And so I actually really need to prioritize more that like capacity piece on improving how far I can run at one time. And my like aerobic foundation. My pace is actually pretty decent when I go run. So I'm going to stay away from pushing my pace a lot more and more that like being able to expand how long I can run it. Extra credit that you can do, again, walk, 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 walk. And then a lot of times what I'll see with this too is people will only do cardio. And so if you're not resistance training, add that in, even if it's one day, again, 2 or more is better, but include resistance training if you aren't already. So an example of what this could look like, day one, we might have an aerobic interval where we're doing a 2.5 mile walk run, a half-mile on, quarter-mile off. Day two is going to be like a low intensity or a steady state day. So maybe we're going to do some intentional zone 2 running or cardio on a bike or something. Or we go on a really long walk or hike where we're pushing the pace. But again, kind of keeping heart rate zone 2 to 3. And then day three is going to be a run plus a walk run day where maybe we're doing 2.5 miles total, a mile run plus a quarter mile on, quarter mile off to help to improve that ability to run continuously. If you've got someone who's really cardio motivated and they're willing to dedicate like around 3 hours a week to training each week, we might consider a 4 day plan. And most often, this type of person is going to be someone who's a little bit more endurance focused. They're a runner, a cyclist, a swimmer, maybe an avid hiker, someone who cares deeply about their fitness. And so, again, the goal is that we want to make sure that we're ticking off that low, moderate, and high intensity things, and we're considering what this person's gaps and goals are. If they care a lot about endurance exercise, they probably have a decent aerobic base, and they might need to be focusing on pulling up their pace, or including sometimes with runners especially, you'll see that they just go like 80% hard 80% of the time, and then they end up broken. And so making sure that we teach them to like pull back and actually include some more low intensity stuff can be a big hurdle, but like big add for a lot of them. So again, encourage extra credit. You guessed it, walk. Include HIIT as part of your resistance training. And then again, kind of doubling down on the resistance training. If they aren't resistance training, go pick up some weight. It's going to help you be a better cardio sport athlete. So make sure that, for your runners, like resistance training is huge for injury prevention, for lower body health, for prevention of stress fractures, for cyclists. If you're a cyclist, you don't get any, it's really hard on your bone density because you're not getting any impact. Um, and so, unless you fall. And so making sure that you strength train can really help with that, like bone health, as well as posture, because you guys are hunched over on the bike all the time. Swimmers, again, injury prevention for shoulders, all sorts of stuff. Um, yeah. So, example of what this could look like. I am giving a specific example for a recreational 5K runner with a time goal. So day one, we might focus on intervals to help pull up pace. So they're going to do a mile to a mile and a half total for 200 meters on, 200 meters off, and we are pushing pace pretty hard on those 200s. Day two is going to be like a low intensity or a steady state. So maybe they're going to go 3 miles. The first and third mile, they're going to be in heart rate zone 2, the second mile in heart rate zone 3, which is going to be a really slow pace. Or they can go and do 30 minutes or more of heart rate zone 2 in the gym on a machine. Day 3 is going to be the tempo run. So this is going to be the one that eventually will be like your 5K, but if we're in the middle of a plan, maybe we're just doing 2 miles, and we're going to run it at a 5K pace plus or minus your 10 seconds off of your mile pace. And then day 4, maybe we're going to do a longer fartlek run with an endurance focus. So we're going to go 5 miles, RPE of 5 to 6, and we're going to have 2 to 3 quarter mile at our 5K pace. So those are some examples. Again, not the only way by any means to lay stuff out, but some examples of what that could look like and what it looks like to plug in some of those different pieces. When we talk about progressing and regressing for cardio exercises, in general, we want to keep changes in volume and intensity, like 10 to 20% of your weekly volume. 20% is pushing it, unless you're like just starting out on running. But if we are making changes over 20% of your weekly volume, that is a good way to sign up for an injury. So make sure that we are taking those changes slow. It's easy to want to take on more than you can chew when you're motivated, but taking those slow, small bites can be really helpful to make sure that you're progressing healthily, and injury free. Um, when you are changing intervals, I find it helpful to increase your work times by 15 to 30 seconds at a time, or decrease your rest time by 15 to 30 seconds at a time, or if you want to do it by mileage, quarter mile to a half mile. If you're a new runner, you might need to change it by less, and that's okay. And these are time for the distance. These are running references, not cycling. Cycling is going to be different. But in general, you want to make those changes every 1 to 3 weeks. Make changes to the work time or the rest time, not both at the same time. You can change one week and then the other week. And then kind of with that, don't change all 3 of your runs in 1 week. Change one at a time. That way you can see how you feel. If you change too many at a time, it can be a lot for your body. Pace, or like the intensity that you're working at, a lot of times will adapt on its own. It can be an indicator that it's time to progress when you kind of get to a point and you're like, wow, like, I'd been running a 9-minute mile and now I'm running closer to an 8:45. Like that can be a good tell that it's time to make your workout a little bit harder through either your work time or your rest time. And then the other part of progressing and regressing with cardio is to really listen to your body, like dial in, see how your body feels. If something feels really easy, like make it slightly harder and see how you respond. Don't make a huge change because then you're gonna trash your body. But like make a small change, and if it feels great, then like hang there for a week, and then you can bump it up again. Make again those small changes week to week, and then vice versa. If you feel trashed after a workout, Give yourself some time to rest. Heart rate zone 2 cardio can be really helpful for that. Like if you feel trashed, like don't go in and do your intense workout. Swap it out for some low intensity. Hop on a bike, go for a walk, go for a hike, that type of thing. And then regress that workout next time. Don't do it again, so that you don't end up just trashed. That's a sign that you need to dial it back. If you had a really stressful day, that can also be a factor. Know if you're coming into your workout and you just don't feel good, like adjust that workout. Know when you need to back off. Don't push just because it's what's written in your workout. Know when you need to kind of dial back, and when you're good to push. And sometimes that takes going through a little bit of a warm up and getting started to really know. So be open to pushing if you feel good, once you get into it. But if not, like maybe you only do half of your volume that day and then you finish out with some low intensity cardio. And that goes for strength training and cardio training. A quick note on mobility and flexibility. There are times where it's appropriate to do just some sessions on that. But in general, with mobility and flexibility, the best way to improve that is to move well and to move often. Um, Yoga and Pilates and stuff like that, they're fantastic. I do elements of both. I've done some yoga consistently in the past. Um, they are very good practices. They will not make you strong. They're not going to give you the cardio benefit that you need. And so don't rely on those to be your only forms of exercises. They are, for most people, should be additive. And if that's the step where you're at, that's okay. If that's your entry into fitness, go for it. Anything is going to be better than nothing. Um, but if you're doing it just because you feel like you need an extra training session to work on mobility and flexibility, I think there's better ways. So some tips that can help with mobility and flexibility include movement snacks throughout your day. Get up and move around. Take a little bit of a mobility break. Do, a little 10-minute yoga routine or some dynamic warm up type stuff throughout your day. Those are going to help doing that. You're going to get a lot more out of moving more often than you are doing like a concentrated hour of mobility. Intentionally warm up and cool down. If mobility and flexibility is a concern for you, um, you are not allowed to skip warm ups and cool downs. Those are prime times to do those. It doesn't have to take long. Take 5 minutes. Go through, be very intentional with it. Get in, get some good work in, and that's gonna really help do that too. Strength training through a full range of motion. I've referenced before, strength training is one of the best ways to improve your mobility. So as long as you're doing it safely and with good technique, strength training through a full range of motion is very helpful with improving your mobility. And then include 1 to 2 dynamic mobility focused exercises in each of your strength days. So those places where I plugged in all the core, you can use mobility as an alternate for some of those. So if I have 2 supersets of exercises, I might make one of those a core and then one of those a mobility focus on that third superset. And then, or if I have 3, then maybe 1 to 2 of them are mobility exercises, and then the other 2 are core. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can sneak in mobility in all sorts of ways. Feel free to send me a draft of workouts that you've created for yourself, and I'm happy to help you plug in stuff if that's something that you're concerned about, and to just kind of give you a general look over for those. And then some final notes about bringing it all together. Good training is simple and sustainable, and sometimes, maybe even often, a little boring. A lot of times we try to make it too complicated, when really, like, we just need to tick off the basics really well and really consistently. A less than perfect plan done consistently is far better than a perfect plan you do intermittently. I know I've hit this hard today, but um, consistency really is the king. If you're not getting in there consistently, you're not going to see adaptation. If you want change, you have to show up and do the work. Make sure that you include activities and exercises that you enjoy. If you don't enjoy traditional strength training or traditional cardio, make sure that you're including something that you really enjoy. Like if you enjoy going out and like doing a bike ride, like even if it's not the desired, like your target stimulus, like if that's how you get into doing it, like go for it. Make sure that you include that. Um, if it's doing it with a friend or if it's like going and walking around the zoo or like whatever that looks like needs to look like for you, choose an activity that you enjoy, because that's going to help you stay motivated to keep after it. And then start small. Reflect on what is just one thing that you want to add or change. A lot of times we try to make too big of a change all at once, and then we aren't able to stick to it. So think about one small thing that you want to change that would move you towards your goal, and then let's figure out how to work that in. Maybe if you don't resistance train at all, you want to start. Let's figure out how we can fit in 2 20-minute sessions into your week. And or vice versa, if you don't do any cardio, and you're kind of cardio averse, but you know that you've got a PFA coming up, let's figure out how to fit in some consistent training for that so that you're able to meet that goal. So if you guys have any questions, or would like me to look over a workout program for you, I am more than happy to do that. Please reach out. We are always happy to be there for you guys for that. So uh, let us know how it goes as you are creating your workouts. Let us know what help you need, what maybe oversight you need, to make sure that you're doing stuff on the right track. And we will be here. I hope you enjoy your week. Thanks.